Okay.
Welcome, Nick Malyshev, head of the OECD Regulatory Policy Division, and thank you for taking the time to answer to 3 questions on international regulatory cooperation.
Thank you, Jan. It's a real pleasure to be here today with you, and we're very excited to be launching these best practice principles on international regulatory cooperation forthwith.
Nick, why do you consider international regulatory cooperation important today?
I think it's important to remind ourselves how unique the last 18 months have been. The entire globe is living through a pandemic. If there's ever been the need for cooperation internationally, it's now in order to overcome this pandemic, in order to rebuild economies. So, I think it's important to reflect on how governments and citizens have been working together. We've obviously, governments have strived to maintain supply chains of essential goods and services. The scientific community has shared the DNA virus, which led to the very quick development of the vaccines. Countries have rolled out programs to support economies and citizens. So again, the international community, the globe really came together over the last 18 months to deal with this sort of once in a century crisis. I think it's also important to reflect on how we manage the global commons today. When you think about the really big issues such as climate change, migration, dealing with the big platforms, they all require linked up action. No government on its own can solve any one of these things by itself. So again, international cooperation, I think today is more important than ever.
Thanks, Nick. And how can IRC benefit the better regulation agenda in particular?
I think it's important to remember what the inherent principles of better regulation are. It's really trying to ensure that regulations are effective and they're efficient. How can a regulation be effective if the problem, the harm that any regulator is trying to solve occurs across the border? Say, think about air pollution, think about water pollution. One needs to have a linked up approach if you're going to have an effective regulation within your regime. Also, when you think about efficiency, again, regulatory interventions need to be done so in the least costly form possible. But again, if you have a regulatory regime that's very fragmented from your trading partners, from people who might be investing in your jurisdiction, again, you're not going to have an efficient regulatory system. So again, really thinking about how your regulations might align with your neighbors is extremely important. Speaking of efficiency, again, IRC can really support administrative efficiency by having regulators share intelligence, share resources, have linked up approaches to common problems. So again, I think the elements, the benefits of international regulatory cooperation really address these core better regulation principles and ideas around making certain that regulations are both effective and efficient.
And how will the IRC best practice principles help in this regard?
I think it's when you think about international cooperation, you obviously think about working with your neighbors, but I think within the IRC best practice principles, 2/3 of what we're suggesting are things that one can do unilaterally, things that you can do within your own jurisdiction, which really support better international outcomes. For instance, we strongly believe that countries need to adopt a specific IRC strategy and develop institutions and a governance framework around it. What we've seen in most jurisdictions are very ad hoc approaches to international cooperation. Some of them successful, but many not. But clearly the full benefits of IRC really need to be strongly embedded within the mindset of better regulation within jurisdictions. Likewise, we really think that the best practice principles provide some very solid advice in terms of how you use the tools of better regulation to really support better outcomes. For instance, by using, we provide some ideas in terms of how you can measure impacts beyond your border through using impact assessment, how you can much more actively engage with the international community through stakeholder consultation, how you can sort of look through an IRC lens to ensure that your regulations are aligned with international standards or with the regulations of your most significant trading and investment partners. So again, it really tries to find, we're trying to identify how IRC can really be embedded within the domestic mindset in the application of good regulatory practices.
Thank you very much, Nick, for taking your time and for giving some very interesting insights on international regulatory cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.